Everyone heard the pounding on the gate, but only I knew what it felt like in my chest. Each slam of a fist against the metal rattled through me like a war drum, and in that moment I asked myself what kind of neighbors behave like this. The shouting had started minutes before, loud and full of words I couldn't quite believe. "Out of compliance," they barked. "Surveillance equipment," they accused, as if the cameras I had set up to capture herons and osprey were some sort of spy network. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, almost. But laughter can be a mask, can't it? Because behind the small chuckle that slipped out, my stomach tightened into a knot. I knew deep down that these people weren't bluffing. They weren't simply hurling empty threats to scare me off. They had come prepared, or at least they thought they had. And when three men in mismatched black vests rounded the corner like actors in a cheap crime show, my pulse spiked. The leader, a broad man with sweat dripping down his neck, waved a paper at me like it was a sword. He called himself enforcement. He called my work unauthorized activity. But the laminated badge on his chest looked like something printed from a home office, not a badge of authority. I pressed my hand against the gate, feeling the cool steel under my palm, and I thought about the equipment behind me. Years of my life, 3 years of sweat, patience, and more money than I'd ever wanted to admit I'd spent. $20,000 in specialized cameras, lenses, stabilizers. Everything I needed to document migration patterns, everything I'd built my career on, sat exposed behind a thin chain-link fence. If they wanted to push this further, if they decided fists meant more than words, I could lose it all in minutes. So I asked the questions that needed asking. Which HOA do you represent? Where's your documentation? Show me the vote, the community approval. And as my words cut through their rehearsed lines, I saw it, the flicker of doubt in their eyes. The two standing behind the leader shifted uncomfortably, and for a moment their swagger faltered. They didn't have the answers. They didn't have the authority. All they had was intimidation, and intimidation only works when you let it. Ringleader Mike, he finally called himself, stammered something about Mrs. Henderson. That name hit the air like oil on water. Henderson, Donna Henderson. I didn't need a file or a history book to know the type. She was the kind of neighbor who dressed her ambition in community slogans, the kind who believed control was the same as care. She hadn't called me, hadn't sent a letter, hadn't knocked on my door. No, she'd sent muscle. And that told me everything about the battle I was stepping into. I slipped my state-issued filming permit between the bars of the gate, letting the seal catch the sunlight. "Department of Natural Resources," I said, steady as stone. "I have the right to be here, I have the right to film." Mike leaned in, scanning the lines he clearly didn't understand, and I watched his confidence drain like water through a sieve. The others craned their necks, reading words that turned their accusations into dust. My so-called surveillance gear. It was the very equipment that let scientists and streaming platforms tell the stories of migration, of survival, of beauty. If they wanted to call that spying, then maybe televisions should be classified as military hardware too. I laughed then, a real laugh, sharp and echoing through the tension, because their theater was crumbling and I could feel it. Still, laughter wasn't victory. Not yet. Because in the silence that followed, I knew Henderson was still out there pulling strings, and people who send others to do their bidding don't give up after the first pushback. As I locked my gate and pulled out my phone, I felt the weight of what was coming. The battle wasn't just about a permit or a patch of land. It was about a woman who thought she could turn a wildlife sanctuary into her personal wedding venue. It was about my career, my name, my future, all hanging in the balance. And in that moment, I understood something simple but unshakable. Sometimes, survival starts not with fists, not with shouting, but with standing your ground, laughing at the absurdity, and calling in the real law. Because if they thought this was over, they were about to learn how wrong they were. Her voice came through the line like honey laced with glass, smooth, sweet, but sharp enough to cut. "Lucas," she said, dragging my name out like we'd been friends for years. "I just wanted to clear up this little misunderstanding." Behind her words, I could hear the shuffle of papers, the clack of a keyboard, the hum of someone orchestrating a performance. And then I realized the timing wasn't coincidence. While her thugs stood at my gate pretending to be officers, Donna Henderson was calling me, hopping to lock me in with charm where intimidation had failed. That was her strategy: 2 fronts, 2 weapons, 1 goal. She emailed me a glossy brochure before I could respond. It landed in my inbox with the weight of betrayal. My sanctuary, my lake, my cameras, my marsh, had been digitally transformed into a wedding venue, archways draped in silk, white chairs lined along the shore. The very spot where herons lifted into the morning sky now littered with cartoon rose petals. I scrolled in silence, my pulse thundering because it wasn't just marketing. It was theft. "You see," she chirped, voice dripping with triumph. "We've already had 18 sign-ups for the new HOA Lake program. All I need is your cooperation. It's inevitable, Lucas. Don't be the last man standing." 18, she wasn't bluffing. Somewhere in this neighborhood, signatures had been gathered, promises made. But I hadn't signed anything. Not a word, not a line, I never would. And yet there she was, talking as if my property already belonged to her scheme. Her tone shifted then, friendliness stripped away. "Join, pay your dues, or relocate your little bird-watching hobby." The venom in the word hobby made my jaw clench. 3 years of field work, contracts with streaming platforms, permits from state agencies, and she dismissed it like I was a child with a toy camera. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw every tripod, every lens straight into the lake. But instead, I let silence hang. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than rage. When I finally answered, my voice came out low, steady. "You're not talking about community spirit. You're talking about business, your business, and you're using an HOA as your disguise." The line went quiet. That silence told me everything. I'd hit the truth square on. But she wasn't done, not Donna. Within 48 hours, a neighbor texted me a link, a site. My name plastered across the screen, Lucas Robinson, the neighborhood spy. The photos were mine, but doctored, timestamps faked, metadata altered. The words painted me as some predator watching families, watching children. My morning coffee went cold as I scrolled. I recognized the writing style, the melodrama. It was her, or at least her hand guiding it. And in that moment, rage shook me so hard I nearly spilled the cup. Because this wasn't just about land anymore. This was character assassination, crafted to destroy me piece by piece. An hour later, my phone rang again. Not her this time. The Nature Foundation. Concerned voices on the line, questions about my permit, about whether I was in compliance. Her lies had traveled fast, farther than I thought possible. If they pulled my authorization, every contract I had, every deadline with Netflix, every project would crumble like ash. I pressed my hands against the table, breathing hard, staring out at the lake. The herons glided low over the water, oblivious to the storm closing in around me. And in that silence, one thought anchored itself. She wouldn't stop. Not until I was broken. But I had something she didn't, the truth, and I was going to make sure the world saw it. Because sometimes you don't fight fire with fire. You fight it with sunlight, bright, blinding, undeniable. Everyone in the neighborhood saw the patrol car roll up, but only I felt the weight in my chest when Officer Jason Martinez stepped out. Crisp uniform pressed, badge gleaming in the fading light. He wasn't like Donna's weekend enforcers. This was real authority, and for the first time, I wondered if her smear campaign had gotten further than I'd feared. He parked deliberately across my driveway, blocking me in as if I were the criminal. Clipboard in hand, he read aloud the complaint, threats against community enforcement personnel. My heart dropped. She'd actually done it, turned her lies into an official police report. And now I wasn't just a nuisance to her scheme. I was a suspect. When he asked to see my equipment, my voice nearly cracked. Thousands of hours of footage, 3 years of my life sat on those hard drives. If he confiscated them, if even a hint of suspicion stuck, my career would be over before it had a chance to bloom. I let him pass the gate, hands trembling as I unlocked the shed where my cameras were stored. He inspected the cases, the memory cards, the screens. His eyes narrowed. My pulse pounded. But then something shifted. He clicked through the files, one after another, watching great blue herons stretch their wings, ducks skimming across the water, owls captured under pale moonlight. His expression softened. For the first time, suspicion gave way to understanding. He saw it. He saw what I had spent years building. "You've got nothing but birds here," he said finally, flipping through the images with a kind of reverence. "Not a single frame of your neighbors, not one." His tone carried both relief and frustration. Relief that the accusations were baseless, frustration that he'd been forced here on a lie. Over his radio, her voice crackled again, Donna, shrill and dramatic. "Officer, he's threatening my team with violence. He's destroying property as we speak." The desperation in her tone was unmistakable, but Martinez wasn't buying it. He held the radio close, speaking evenly. "Ma'am, you cannot hire private security to enforce non-existent HOA authority. That's impersonation under state law." Silence followed, heavy and humiliating. I almost smiled, almost. The officer turned back to me, shaking his head. "She bypassed every required step. No written notice, no hearings, no membership votes. Nothing." His words landed like a lifeline. "State permits override HOA rules. Think of it like federal law outranking city ordinances. She doesn't have the power to touch you." For the first time in weeks, my lungs felt full. Air came easier. His words weren't just reassurance. They were validation, confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that the law was actually on my side. But the relief was short-lived. When he left, her number flashed on my phone almost immediately. I answered, and her voice was venom wrapped in silk. "You think the police can protect you? You have no idea who I am, no idea what I can do." The mask was gone now. No charm, no sweetness, just raw, seething fury. I held the phone tight, my jaw locked. She thought fear would wear me down, but instead it fueled something deeper. That night I set up every camera, every sensor, every piece of equipment with a new purpose. Not just to capture wildlife anymore. To capture the predators walking on two legs, because I knew she wouldn't stop. And I needed proof no smear campaign could erase. Sometimes survival isn't just about standing your ground. It's about building a record so airtight, so undeniable, that when the truth comes crashing down, there's nowhere left for the liars to hide. Everyone could feel it the moment they stepped into the community center, tension buzzing in the air like static before a storm. The folding chairs were lined up in neat rows, half the room leaning forward in suspicion, the other half leaning back, arms crossed, waiting to see who would blink first. Donna had called an emergency meeting about the so-called filming crisis, and she made sure it felt like a performance. A projector lit up the wall with her slides, bold red letters, dramatic warnings, and grainy images of my cameras. She spoke like a prosecutor, not a neighbor. But here's the truth. When fear is the stage, people will listen, even if the script is nonsense. I sat in the back at first, laptop under my arm, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to walk out, let her spin her lies until she choked on them. But another part of me, the part that had watched Heron's Nest for years, the part that had pulled all-nighters protecting my gear, knew I had to speak. Not just for me, but for the truth itself. When she finally paused, basking in the silence she mistook for agreement, I stood. The room shifted with me, eyes turning, whispers rising. My palms were damp as I connected the laptop to the projector. And then the birds took flight. For 20 minutes, the screen filled with scenes no one in that room had ever noticed. Geese slicing through morning mist, owls gliding in silence across starlit skis, herons wadding with dignified patience. Gasps echoed. Mrs. Patterson, silver-haired and soft-spoken, wiped tears as she whispered, "I've watched those herons from my window for decades. I never knew someone was capturing them like this." The silence that followed wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of awe. I turned, steady now, and spoke. "This isn't surveillance. It's conservation. Every frame you just saw is part of a contract with streaming platforms, part of scientific studies that matter. What Donna calls spying is the same kind of work that protects endangered species." The spell began to crack. People shifted in their seats. Some nodded, some frowned unsure, and then Tom Wilson, Donna's own ally, rose. His voice carried across the room, steady and sharp. "Nobody ever voted on this, not once." The air shifted like a tide turning. His words weren't just doubt. They were betrayal to her camp, validation to mine. Donna's face flushed crimson as she scrambled, pivoting from privacy concerns to profits. This location could generate revenue for the community, weddings, events, development opportunities. And there it was, the mask slipped. No more talk of privacy, of protection, just money. A retired attorney in the crowd, distinguished gray hair, voice like a hammer, leaned forward. "Donna, where are the minutes? Where is the vote approving commercial use of this property? Show us the documentation." She froze. For the first time, she had no script, no slideshow, no answer. Her silence rang louder than my footage ever could. I looked out across the room and saw it, neighbors dividing, some clinging to her promises of profit, others recoiling at the fraud exposed before them. Folding chairs squeaked as people shifted sides, literally moving from one cluster to another. It wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a split in the heart of the community. And in that fracture, one truth became undeniable. Donna's empire wasn't built on authority. It was built on deception. And deception always cracks when too many eyes are watching. That night, as I walked out with the projector under my arm, the cool air hit my face like a baptism. For the first time, I realized I wasn't fighting this alone. Neighbors had seen, neighbors had doubted, and once doubt takes root, it grows fast. But I also knew something else. People like Donna don't go down quietly, and if she'd lost control in public, she'd try to take it back in private. That thought followed me all the way home, and when the first motion alert pinged on my phone after midnight, I knew I was right. The alert came at 2:15 a.m. sharp. A ping on my phone, then another, then three more in rapid succession. My cameras, designed to capture owls hunting under the cover of darkness, were catching something else entirely. Human movement, multiple figures moving fast, coordinated, my pulse hammered as I opened the feed. There they were, three shadows slipping through the marsh like predators. They weren't here for birds, they were here for me. One carried a crowbar, another a heavy flashlight. The third lagged behind, nervous but following orders, and from the shoreline unmistakable came the voice that made my skin crawl. Donna, clear as a bell in the night air, barking instructions like a commander. Take down the mounts, smash the housings, don't leave a trace. My chest burned as I watched years of work, 3 years of footage, equipment worth more than I could replace, get torn apart like it was nothing. Camera poles toppled, housings cracked. Lenses plunged into the muddy water with dull splashes. Every strike was a knife in my gut. But here's the thing Donna hadn't planned for. My backups. Hidden cameras, concealed housings, lenses tucked into places no one suspected. They were recording everything, faces, license plates, even the gleam of the crowbar under moonlight. The same equipment they tried to destroy was capturing their every move in high definition. I watched one stumble, Mike, the ringleader from before. He slipped on the bank, plunging waist-deep into the lake with a splash so loud it could have woken the herons. For a moment the scene looked like slapstick, but my laughter caught in my throat, because this wasn't comedy. This was destruction. The sound of shattering glass pulled me back. Another camera went down. My hands shook, torn between calling for help and watching the evidence pile up. But I dialed anyway, 911. My voice came out hoarse but steady. This is an active sabotage. I have it all on video. Send units now. While I waited, headlights flared at the far end of the property. A car door slammed. And then, like fate itself, a furious voice cut through the chaos. Jennifer Davis, one of the brides Donna had duped. "Where's our money?" she screamed, storming toward Donna. $5,000 for a wedding that doesn't even exist. You lied to us. Her fiancé, Mark, was right behind her, waving receipts, contracts, evidence of fraud. The timing was almost poetic. Sabotage in one hand, theft in the other. Donna's empire was unraveling, and every thread was being pulled in front of witnesses. Red and blue lights flooded the marsh. Patrol cars skidded in, spotlights snapping on. The saboteurs froze like deer in headlights. Two bolted into the trees, but Mike, waterlogged, stumbling, wasn't so lucky. Officers waded in, dragging him out of the muck, his face twisted with panic. His capture wasn't just satisfying, it was proof that none of this was accidental. I retrieved the memory cards from the hidden housings, clutching them like treasure. They weren't just files. They were my salvation. Donna's voice ordering the destruction, Mike's face caught in the act. Every swing of a crowbar, every crash of broken equipment preserved forever. Standing there under flashing lights, mud splattered on my boots, I realized something strange. Yes, I had lost. Thousands of dollars of gear, months of work, shattered in minutes. But in losing, I had gained something far more powerful, evidence, undeniable, irrefutable evidence. Because sometimes justice doesn't come wrapped in victories. Sometimes it comes hidden in the ashes of what they tried to take from you. And I knew then the game had changed. This wasn't an HOA dispute anymore. This was organized crime, and the proof was in my hands. Everyone in the station leaned forward when the footage played. Night vision lit up the screen in ghostly green and gray, every detail crisp. The saboteurs creeping through the marsh, crowbars swinging, lenses shattering. And then the sound, Donna's unmistakable voice cutting across the water like a knife. "Tonight we clear the site permanently. Tomorrow this becomes our venue." The detective paused the video, staring at me with wide eyes. "That's her." I nodded, my throat was dry, but my resolve was steel. "That's her, that's the HOA president." He hit play again, and the room filled with her orders, her threats, her control. No jury in the world could unhear that. It was her downfall recorded in real time. But the footage was only the beginning. On the desk lay a USB drive, one I had turned over with trembling hands. Emails, contracts, records, months of correspondence between Donna, her so-called security company, and a slick outfit called Premium Events LLC. Every line was a breadcrumb, and together they formed a trail of racketeering dressed up as community service. The detective spread the printouts across the desk like puzzle pieces. "She's been booking weddings for months, collecting deposits, using HOA authority as her cover. We're talking fraud, impersonation, conspiracy, and that's just scratching the surface." It was bigger than me, bigger than the lake. She wasn't just harassing one filmmaker, she was running an enterprise targeting properties like mine across counties. I thought back to the brochure she'd sent me, how professional it looked, how easily it could fool anyone. And then I thought about Jennifer and Mark Davis standing in the mud screaming about their stolen deposit. They weren't alone. She had stolen from half a dozen couples, maybe more. Their dreams, their money, all built on land she didn't own. The more the detective dug, the darker it got. Proxy votes forged to take HOA presidency. Fake bylaws slipped into newsletters. Phony emergency powers she declared without legal foundation. She hadn't just bent the rules, she had broken every single one. And then came the call. Federal investigators. They picked up the case because Donna's schemes crossed state lines. The contracts weren't local. The deposits traveled across county borders, routed through accounts tied to Premium Events LLC. What she called development, the FBI called racketeering. I sat there silent, trying to absorb it all. For weeks I had felt cornered, like a single man holding the line against an army. But now, watching seasoned agents map out her crimes, I realized she had overplayed her hand. The more she tried to crush me, the more evidence she left behind. That night back home, I walked down to the lake. The water was calm, moonlight silvering the ripples. A heron lifted off from the reeds, wings slow and steady. My cameras were gone, shattered and drowned, but the backup footage sat safe, copied twice, ready for court. And in that quiet moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Sometimes justice doesn't move fast. It crawls, it circles, it waits. But when it comes heavy. And Donna Henderson was about to learn that weight. Because this wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was about fraud, conspiracy, and federal law. And no fake badge, no thugs at my gate, no doctored article could shield her now. Everyone held their breath when the courtroom lights dimmed and the first video rolled. On the giant screen, the marsh came alive in grainy night vision, figures with crowbars creeping like shadows, Donna's voice cutting through the stillness. "Tonight we clear the site permanently. Tomorrow this becomes our venue." Jurors leaned forward. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others scribbled notes, eyes darting from the footage to Donna sitting stiff at the defense table. She tried to keep her composure, but her face betrayed her. Every word she'd once barked with confidence now echoing back like a confession. Then came the second reel. The birds, my birds. Herons rising into the dawn, owls gliding under starlight, geese carving paths through mist. The footage I'd nearly lost forever filled the room with silence. A different kind of silence, the kind that settles when beauty makes people forget to breathe. The prosecutor didn't need to hammer the point. The contrast spoke for itself. On one screen, destruction. On the other, preservation. Donna's greed versus my dedication. When witnesses took the stand, the picture sharpened further. Mrs. Patterson, silver-haired and steady, testified first. "I've watched him film for 3 years. Not once has he pointed those cameras at a neighbor. Only birds, only the lake. Her voice trembled, but her conviction was unshakable. Then Jennifer and Mark Davis. Their testimony was fire. They laid out receipts, contracts, every email from Donna promising a dream wedding by a lake she didn't own. "We gave her $5,000, Jennifer said, her voice cracking. "She took our money and laughed about it." A retired attorney neighbor stood next, dismantling her defense with surgical precision. "There were no votes, no minutes, no authority. What she did wasn't governance, it was theft under the mask of community improvement." Piece by piece, the case built itself into a mountain too heavy for her lies to climb. Donna finally took the stand, her last chance to salvage control. She spoke about development, about protecting property values, about her vision for the neighborhood. But every word rang hollow. The prosecutor pressed her with the recordings, the contracts, the forged votes. "Show us the minutes, Donna. Show us the legal authority." She had nothing. Her mask cracked under the pressure. She ranted about ungrateful neighbors, about opportunity wasted, about how she had backing from powerful developers. But when asked to name them, she couldn't. Her voice broke into shrill desperation, her eyes wild, her hands gripping the stand like a woman clinging to a crumbling cliff. The jury saw it, the judge saw it, everyone saw it. And then came the verdict, guilty on all counts. Vandalism, fraud, impersonation of authority, racketeering, a lifetime ban from HOA leadership, restitution ordered, federal prison time set. As the words echoed, I felt the weight lift, not just off my shoulders, but off the entire community. Neighbors who once doubted me looked at me differently. Some nodded. Some whispered apologies. Some just stared, realizing they had almost let her con them into the same trap. When I stepped out of that courtroom, the air felt different. Lighter. Sharper. Like the lake itself had exhaled after holding its breath too long. 3 years of filming, every long dawn and sleepless night had been worth it, not just for the contracts, not just for the birds, but for the truth. Because sometimes justice isn't about winning fast. It's about standing your ground long enough for the truth to land. And in that courtroom, it landed like a heron on still water, graceful, undeniable, final. When the judge's gavel struck for the final time, the sound carried further than that courtroom. It echoed across the lake, through the reeds, into every home that had once whispered doubts about me. 4 years in federal prison, $90,000 in restitution, all wedding deposits returned with interest, and a lifetime ban from ever holding HOA leadership again. The sentence wasn't just punishment, it was a reckoning. Neighbors who once glared at me over fences now shook my hand. Some apologized. Others simply nodded, the weight of realization in their eyes. They understood now. This had never been about petty HOA politics or squabbles over dues. This had been about greed weaponized, community twisted into a mask for crime, and they had nearly fallen for it. As I walked out of court, the air hit me sharp, almost electric. Lighter, cleaner. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The lake shimmered in my mind's eye, calm and unbroken, like it had been waiting for this moment too. And when I finally returned to the water's edge, camera bag lighter but heart steadier, a heron descended through the sky and landed in perfect stillness. My father would have smiled. The restitution bought more than replacements. It bought upgrades, night vision systems stronger than before, equipment that could withstand sabotage. What they tried to erase had only sharpened my resolve. My contracts not only survived, they expanded. Streaming platforms doubled down, hungry for the story behind the footage. Conservation groups reached out. Universities requested screenings. My work, once threatened, was now a symbol. Proof that truth, when defended, could outlive even the loudest lies. The neighborhood changed too. With Donna gone, Tom Wilson stepped up not to seize power but to rebuild trust. Transparent elections, real votes, clear bylaws, no more forged signatures, no more fake authority. The same neighbors who once followed muffins and newsletters now demanded accountability. They had seen how close they'd come to losing not just their trust, but their community. And for me, I finally understood something that had taken 3 long years and one very dangerous neighbor to learn. Sometimes survival isn't about shouting louder or fighting dirtier. Sometimes it's about laughing when they pound your gate, locking it tight, and calling the police. Not because it feels powerful in the moment, but because the truth doesn't need theater. It just needs time. Months later, standing by the lake at dawn, I thought about Donna's last words before sentencing. She insisted she'd only been helping the community prosper. I looked her straight in the eye then, voice steady as the water, and told her, "You weren't helping anyone. You were running a criminal enterprise behind a fake HOA mask." There was no comeback, no script, no slideshow she could hide behind. That was the end of her charade. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. They wanted to turn wetlands into a wedding stage. They walked away with subpoenas instead. They wanted to bury my work under lies. Instead, the truth became my shield, my sword, and my story. If you're still here, you know this wasn't just about me. It was about standing up when someone tries to rewrite your life with forged papers and fake authority. It was about neighbors learning the difference between leadership and theft. And it was about remembering that even when the thugs are loud and the Koran's dramatic, the truth has wings. Just like that heron on my lake. And if you've made it this far, I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and if you want to keep supporting stories like this, there's always that little super thanks button below. Until next time, keep your gates strong, keep your cameras rolling, and never let anyone steal your story. Because at the end of the day, no matter how hard they try, the truth always lands. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.